Well, we're back. Happy New Year, everybody.
That's right. Happy New Year, all.
Yep. For those of you who are just now joining us in, I am Six.
I'm MVP.
Our third man, Shoreline, is not in at the moment. He is currently doing offsite work. But this is canceled for me.
You almost said offshore.
Offshore.
Doing offshore work.
Shady stuff. He's doing ninja stuff.
I think he's probably recovering from his New Year's Eve job, which was working a big show for some comedians up in Seattle, I think.
Yeah, that was pretty dope. He gets all the cool jobs.
I know. Unfortunately, it was a no phone show, so no pictures or clips to share with anybody from that event. But at least he'll have memories in his mind.
For as long as they stay there, right?
That's right. Until they're not.
Well, for those of you, this is Cancel for Maintenance, where we talk about the gritty underbelly that is aviation maintenance and a lot of stuff in between to keep us all entertained and possibly not kill ourselves from overstress and overwork.
But let's face it, it's going to happen.
Yeah, the stress is definitely going to happen. If it's not killing us immediately, it's killing us slowly, right?
You know what's funny is I saw some pictures of myself from, let's see. So friends of mine from a job I worked in the past sent me a clip, and they were watching, for those of you who have Paramount Plus streaming service, I guess there's a show on there, a documentary on there called Space Billionaires. And so there's a picture of me standing on, on the flight line talking with, and I can't remember who the person was in the picture at that time. But I was talking with somebody on there, and I was looking at my hair and my beard, and not really any gray in it. Still all brown, youthful, full of life. And then I look at myself in the mirror now, and it's damn near all gray. And that's only been almost 5 years. So pretty wild, to say the least.
Very, very.
But the stress is a very real thing.
Yes, I can agree. And as you're saying this, like, man, I'm like looking at all these pictures of myself, like in the room, like, what the fuck happened?
Right. So exactly what I said too. I'm like, how? So they say some people age like wine. Well, I'm aging like milk.
Same here, man. Like, what the fuck's that smell? Why is there cheese in here? It's not cheese.
Pretty much cottage cheese at this point. Curdled.
Oh, curdled.
So what are we talking about today? What's the subject of today?
So today, let's talk about like distance learning, or electronic distance learning, or e-distance learning. The Zoom boom, as a lot of people have come to know it as.
Or the air quotes, new norm.
The new norm? What is that? So a lot of, if you had to do any type of work in the last 3 years, you would know, like, when the pandemic hit, a lot of stuff had to shift around. Most of it was either you had to learn a new skill set, you had to learn how to get real good with things you've never tried before, us included. And a lot of it, especially for those with kids, had to discover this new thing called online distance learning. For kids, for like, say, college students, it's not that new. Like, they've been doing online learning. But with kids, let me tell you, that's a whole different beast in itself. And then now with the workforce transitioning to a lot of distance learning because they can't do a lot of in-person training, like, say, for hands-on safety classes or practical training, whatever that case is, it all has to move to online. And so when they did this shift, they just kind of went with whatever solution was most affordable and had a decent curriculum to teach people stuff. But if any of you out there have ever tried this, you would immediately know that some of this stuff had a lot of gaps in the training.
Well, yeah, especially for maintainers, right? Whether it's auto, aviation, industrial equipment, heavy machinery, whatever you want to say. I mean, I feel like the CBTs specifically for the aviation industry are all CYA, or cover your ass, right? It's one of those that they can say that if you mess something up, they can say, well, on this date you had this training, so now we can hold your ass to the fire. But but I can tell you from my own personal experience that yeah, I still am doing CBTs, but for me, the only way I learn is by doing OJT, or on the job training, like actually hands on, so you can see what. I mean, yeah, maybe you do a course, you do a CBT, and then you go do the OJT. It shouldn't just be CBT and you're clear to the floor, head out there, and you're good to go on anything, because that's how it's treated. But it shouldn't be treated that way, because anybody can read words on a page, but to put hands to it, that's a whole other level.
Right. And then certain things, you can kind of get away with it, right? Like flight line safety rules, like just the rules, not the actual like driving on the line or pointing out certain marks on the line and stuff like that, but just kind of like simple recognition, like this double yellow line, do not cross ever. This red blinking light, do not cross ever. Or this blue blinking light, right? Don't be within X amount of feet or yards or meters or whatever from it. Easy shit. But like you were saying, some people or some industries, they just take this computer online training and call it law. And it's like, oh, well, you got the training, check mark in the box. Have a good day. I'm like, wait a minute, that's it? And this kind of reminds me of a funny story. One of my coworkers was telling me his security camera system was acting all wonky. And so he got pissed, as anyone should. He called the company to send another guy to come take a look at it. And when he got his security camera system looked at, the previous installer did everything, all sorts of fucked up. And so this guy was like, he's like asking my coworker friend like all sorts of questions, like, did he do this? Did he do that? Any of this? And it's just like nose across the board. And so he spent like the next 5-6 hours fixing the system. And at the end of it, I was like, all right, your security system's all good to go. Should all work fine. And then my coworker friend, he's like, well, why the fuck was it all fucked up in the first place? And the second installer says like, well, see, before the security installer people have to go to like this 3-week course over this one other place. Nowadays, because of the pandemic and shit, they just give them this computer-based training, which is like 2 weeks long, but they don't do any hands-on of actual installation and shit. So the guy who installed his system the first time was one of those computer-based training students. I'm like, Jesus Christ.
Well, and so with that, right? Again, the CBT and you're released to the field, but like in a deployed setting where it's mission based, right? I'll do whatever it takes to get the bird in the air. You say, well, just do OJT with them. Just teach them while they're there. Yeah, we can teach them. They're going to learn a lot here, trial by fire, but they need to have more of an understanding before they get here. Like I can't spend my entire day for the first 2 months that they're here training them on everything they need to do. Like I also need them to be able to function a little bit on their own. So unfortunately they get, the lesser jobs, or we'll just say the bitch work initially, because you don't have time to train them. Like, hey, we got to do this engine change and we have to get it done in a shift because this asset needs to get back up to get over target for XYZ, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's one of those, like, I can't stand there and answer their questions every 5 minutes or tell them every step of the way. Like me and one other person with experience, we're just going to tackle this thing. You guys can just do launch recovery, and then you can go and empty out the waste oil drums or whatever. Like, you know what I mean? Just the easy stuff.
Right. And that's with anything other than just a deployed setting. Like anywhere where like schedule is critical, they're not going to stick the new guy or the less knowing person on that job because it's schedule critical, right? We have to have 4 planes ready for a 3-in-1 go in like 45 minutes or something extreme like that. They're not going to stick the new guy on it. And another sense, if you're even on a deployed setting or out of field setting, you send them that way, they're going to learn that deployed or out of field setting, which is get it done, do it now. And then you come back to like a more controlled, environmental, regulated setting. They're going to not know what the fuck to do because they just said like, oh, you can't change the oil filter that way, or you can't fuel the aircraft that way. I'm like, what?
Yeah, we all learn air quotes hacks in the field to get things done faster, more efficiently, right? But over there, it's, nobody would ever condone that as being the right way to do it, but everybody does it because it's what is necessary to get it done. And to be fair, nothing catastrophic is happening doing the hack way, but it's not by the book for verbatim, right? So nobody would condone it, but everybody understands that it's happening for that mission. But unfortunately, when people are trained in that environment, and I myself am guilty of this, when you're trained in the deployed environment and you come back to your home base where everything is by the book to the T, you get kind of called out and chastised pretty quick for not following the book. And you're going, well, this is how I've done it for the last year overseas. Well, that's not how you were trained. Well, it was, but I guess per the CBT, I wasn't, right? So,
right. That brings up so many memories because I remember getting lit up for a bunch of stuff like that. Like, you're not supposed to do that. Like, well, what do you want me to do? This is how we were trained to do. Like, no, it wasn't. Like, yeah, it was. look at it. But this was back when your training records were very vague, and they were just like, install engine. Sure did. That was it. There wasn't like, did you follow procedures? Did you follow this? Did you sign it off correctly? It just said install engine. Like, yep, I sure did. Where there,
I can tell you from like my first job, right? Their training program was actually pretty extensive. From the day you walk in the door. Now, let's say the training course only runs every so often because they need to get enough new hires on to warrant a decent sized class. So depending on when you get hired, like for myself, I got hired and went straight into the training class, but there were guys in my training who had been there for a month or 2 months already. And all they do is follow around a more experienced person on the line, learning how to, safe for maintenance and how to wing walk and how to, stand fire bottle, all that kind of real low level trivial BS, I guess, that's associated with it. Then we go into the training, but their training was 6 weeks long, and you did everything on that AV. I mean, you learned how to jack the aircraft, how to swing gear, how to remove the gear, reinstall, how to take out actuators and reinstall, how to do every bit of servicing on that AV, engine removals, engine installs, prop removals, prop installs, how to balance the propeller, how to there's turbo chargers on the one motor, and so we learned how to rig the wastegates and how to rig servos and how to do all these things. So when you hit the flight line, you're not as experienced because you haven't done it 100 times, right? But you have a broad knowledge or a more in-depth knowledge of how to do most every job on the AV because you've already done it, versus moving several companies over the years, and some of the companies showed up and it was literally just a piece of paper that they said, just get it signed off when you can. And that was your training. Right. You're like, okay.
Yeah. I've seen some where like they went in depth as like how to paint an aircraft a certain way, like with these special paints. And all it was just like this 30-minute slide. It wasn't like I guess they could call it a CBT or like an actual like where a course where it's like stuff you got to interact with. But this one, it was literally just like a PDF, and you can honestly just have scrolled to the very end, not read a single word, and just say yes, I understand, and boom, you're certified. Like, really, man?
Oh yeah.
I mean, paint's a pretty big deal, man. Like, especially with certain paints, like some of those, like, yeah, they have to be bonded a certain way. They have to be prepped a certain way. They can only be sprayed on certain kind of metals a certain way or composite a certain way, whatever the case may be. And now this person is air quote certified because he air quote read the PDF. No, man.
Well, and then you get leadership that goes, well, just scroll through and sign it real quick. And you're like, well, don't you want me to read through it? No, you're not. You weren't hired as a painter. So you just have to do this because you work on the vehicle and you deal with the surface of the vehicle, and you just need to know kind of how this is applied and how it's protected. But you'll never actually do the job. Well, why don't we just have like a go no go training then? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like why? But it's just one of those. It's all, like I said in the beginning, it's all CYA. Mm-hmm. It's also, we can hold your ass to the fire later for when you inevitably mess something up, because we all have, and you will.
Now, there's different types of online training, and it benefits some people. There's like the online training where it's like a no kidding class where you all are all synced up, and you have to like show your face to the teacher, kind of like how kids were for the last year and then some change, where like you can see each other's faces, you see the teacher talking, you guys get the material, and then they have like this little assignment tab or whatever for you guys to fill out. And then there's the other one where it's like self-paced, where it's almost like not even a class. It's kind of just like it's kind of like independent study. Like here's the material. You have this long to finish everything. And
I know what you're talking about. They hand you a syllabus at the beginning of the year, and it has every course you're going to do until the end of the school year. And they say you have until the end of the school year to get it done. And you always get some people that knock out everything in the first 6 months, and then you get some people that wait till the last month to try to do a whole year's worth of stuff. What a garbage system. Like, well, it's self-paced. I'm like, well, what are you here for then as the teacher, right? What am I learning from you? Because like, well, you learn more from just doing it hands-on yourself and actually reading the material yourself without me assigning and this and that. And you're like, oh, okay, I guess I see some value to that, but that's also very much dependent upon the individual to take the initiative, right?
Right.
And for most of us, we're going to go, nah, just get me out to the floor so I can start working and making money.
Mm-hmm. And that's the big one out of it for online learning, is it depends on the person, because a lot of industries will see this as, okay, this is our catch-off to kind of just divvy out and distribute the training, which in a way it is, but it also depends on the motivation and the hard work and the work ethic of that individual to A, get it done, and B, actually absorb the material. Because we've all done this at one time or another. You see a CBT assigned to you, you're just going to click all the way to the end, take the test, and however many times it takes for you to pass, and then you're on the floor again. Now, some programs, they time out after so many fails, or they reset you after so many fails, but it doesn't really teach you anything. It just teaches you how to take a test, or vice versa. There's other ones where like you take like this 30-minute CBT or whatever the case may be, and they give you like this laundry list of an OJT sheet, and they say, go ahead and get it done. They don't assign you somebody to help you figure it out. They don't assign you like a shift to help you figure it out. They just like, here's your stuff. You have 6 months, get it done. I'm like, okay. And like, well, what do I do? Who do I go to? And assuming like you're not like one of those socially butterflied people where you can just like run up to a random person, like, hey, can you sign up my OJT sheet for doing this? I'm like, sure. But then it also can turn around to be like, the OJT sheet turns into like this pencil whip thing, right? You just get someone who's cool buddies with you, and then you just like blast through all the OJT sheets.
Yeah, or it's one of those like you were there for a job that they were doing. You weren't actively involved. You just happened to be in the vicinity and witness it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, you were there. You saw what happened, signed off. And you're like, yeah, but they weren't hands-on. They didn't learn, let's say for aircraft jacking, right? They didn't operate the jack. They didn't learn what they were supposed to do. They weren't listening to the commands. They weren't part of the process. They don't see where the level goes on the AV to know that it's level, and there's different stuff to it, right? So they didn't know where they need to place the jacks. If the floor is a little uneven, right? They need to learn what to look for in the jack to make sure it gets the most points of contact to the floor as possible to be as safe as possible. There's all sorts of other things just beyond pumping the jack up and bleeding the pressure down for, raising or
Right.
lowering the AV.
Right. It's not like changing the tire in your car where like it's okay if it tips over so many degrees versus like a plane, like all this stuff, it's all being held on by by specific load bearing points. And if those things are not set right, or if it's not engaged correctly, then it throws off the whole CG of the plane. It throws off its flight critical surfaces, all sorts of scary shit that could happen. And you won't even realize it until it goes in the air. And
right. And they don't learn what panels are structural that need to be installed before you raise that AV in the air, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you don't risk damaging the airframe. But they don't. But they sign them off. Oh, you were there. You witnessed it. Well, yeah, they saw the thing move up and move down, and people pumping on the jack and bleeding pressure off. But they didn't see what panels have to be installed. What's the number of points that must be contacting the floor to be safe on the jacks. Where do the jack pad adapters get installed on the airframe? Right. Mm-hmm. For all they saw from their distance, they just, it just goes up and touches the wing and pushes it up. So next thing you know, they're punching a jack straight through the lower skin.
Which I have seen. I've seen them do that
too. Me too. That's why I use this as the example.
Or they use the wrong kind of jack, right? Now for most cases, right? If you're in a specific shop, they have jacks that's universal to most, but you might have some where like you're in an MRO where you have multiple types of aircraft coming in and out. So you might put say a 737 jack on a 777 or some shit like that. It's pretty hard to fuck it up, but I've seen people do it. I mean, people put Skydrow in the fuel system, for God's sake.
The oil system, Skydrow in the oil system.
Yeah, like come on now, like it's not even meant to be in there.
Or nitrogen in the O2 system. Like,
oh my God,
it just blows my mind.
It's like you were a CBT sign off, weren't you? Like, who does that? How do you do that? Put a nitrogen in an oxygen system. They're like different fittings, different service ports, different systems altogether, and the tanks are different colors. I don't get it. But that goes into like how the training is just either glazed over, or the person themselves they just blasted through it, didn't read a thing or didn't retain a thing, and there wasn't anything to reinforce the training. So I think that's like one of the biggest things too, especially like even with like in-person classroom training. Like I know a lot of people doing the new Airbus training, they actually have to sit in a classroom and they just get blasted with so much info. Now for some people, like they're very scholarly like, and they can retain shit and they have like this hardcore memory recall. But for an average person, that's like a lot of info to keep. And then you're just left on your own to figure out how to do the OJT. There's like not like a class to like at least show you how to do it, or at least give you like an intro. Like here's what the tire would do. Here's how you guys would air cool do it. But we just don't have the tools because we're training and no one gives a fuck about us. And we don't have the budget to actually let you touch it. So here's what it is. Get kind of familiar with how it's supposed to work. And then here's a group of guys that are actually doing it. You can't touch it yet because you're not certified, but just know like this is what you're gonna do. Like, okay, I kind of get it. But no, they just like, here's your class. Go and do great things. Like, oh fuck.
So that's why I view the engineer training, right? And I think engineers need to go through the same hands-on that the maintainers do. Because to me, engineers are good at math, but can't apply any of that to their hands. And so when you see the designs or mods that you're doing on certain things, you're going, have they even seen this aircraft before?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would they design it this way? Because all they see is a drawing. And they always say, in theory, per our calculations, it should fit. Yeah, I can make it fit, but let me show you a better way, right?
Right.
That's where the hands-on comes into play, where if you're only CBT based, then you would know. In your CBT, you go, okay, well, it should be able to fit this way, but the hands-on would tell you that, well, there's several components in the way of that, so I need to either rethink about the design or know that I have to incorporate the removal of these other components in this mod to facilitate completion of this mod.
Right. And then they wonder why, like specifically for modifications, where like, why is it taking so long? Why do we have to do all this extra shit? Like, well, because
redlining the shit out of everything.
Yeah. Or like
the mod's only 5 steps long. Well, yeah, to do the mod, but you got to remove half of the guts of the AV to empty out this bay to perform the mod.
Like that wasn't in our plan. Like, well, it should have been, because now we're gonna have to retest every single one of these components before we can go flight ready.
Yeah, we have a month's worth of ops checks to do.
Like, well, this mod was supposed to be done in a week. Like, I mean,
the mod itself will be done in a week, but that'll be after the month of gutting and the month of reinstalling, and then the month of ops checks that follow after that. Yeah. Like, holy shit! I
think I remember an episode, a conversation that with Coyote about like glass cockpit modifications, where like you go from full analog to glass, and they don't realize like A, it doesn't fit, or B, it's too short, so they have to do some other red line mod, and then once it's all together, like, well, now this equals to about 2 months of functional tests before we can actually like send this thing on its way. Like, yeah, that's how it works. Well, welcome to the club, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for showing up.
Right. Appreciate.
So this article says, how can we embrace the positives associated with the increased use of technology, with particular focus on the future of education and aviation? So, with the whole pandemic and everything, and it just feels like it's never going away, and everybody having to adapt constantly, what can we do to embrace the positives? Or I guess, what are the positives?
I mean, I say a positive was like, like at least you're giving yourselves an opportunity to make an actual difference in the training. Because beforehand, right, you just got to have someone who's just extremely smart and just hoping that he's in your shop and he or she is available to give training. So at least now you can pick their brain and like, okay, we're going to put this down on a syllabus, some kind of a syllabus. And then we're going to give this max distribution. So at least everyone has some bit of your brain into the training. And then this is all down to the training department and the people who control the process itself. Is like they have to ensure that it's updated X amount of times in a year to make sure that everything's current. Because how many times have we seen that too, where like we get this online based training and a lot of the shit is out of date or it's long since obsolete. Like, they don't even make this no more, man.
Yeah, but how do we that's people taking the initiative, right, to ensure that that's getting done. Because oftentimes people create the one training and go, well, I'm done with that. Wash my hands of it and never look at it again. It's everybody else's problem.
Mm-hmm.
Without me having to come through and hit them with an iCar. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yep. Or like,
the article kind of goes into this, right? So it says, prior to the pandemic, there were even studies about the maturity of online education. And really it says it's people's perception of distance learning alternatives to traditional classroom-based learning. So it really comes down to what it's saying. It really comes down to your view of it. How do you view online training? Some people love it. Some people hate it. And so it's only going to benefit those who put forth the effort to do it. But even at that, you're still hindered by the lack of hands-on. But then you get some that are like, screw it. I'll just wait until this is all blows over and I can go back to doing hands-on. So again, it's all down to the individual's perception of the distance learning.
Right. And I think this is kind of like where us or everyone as a leader mindset can really step in on this and be like, okay, I would say I would use the CBT as like a familiarization thing, shy of an actual like sit down classroom. It's like you at least are familiar with the idea. Now we'll just reinforce it with actual hands-on, right? Or you can use like or you can do hands-on and have the CBT as like as a reinforcement. Like you will do hands-on, but before anything else, before you leave, make sure you do these X amount of CBTs for reinforcement. I know for some companies, they have to do what's it called? Continuous learning education, where like they have to have so many points in a year to be considered like fully trained. You know what I mean?
I think my sister is a speech pathologist, and I think for her field, I know she has recurrent training she must do annually in order to retain her license. And if any of those trainings expire, the state pulls her license until she submits those trainings.
Yeah. And I think the same is with nurses too. Like, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted.
Well, so what I was going to say was, so like where I'm at now, we've had some incidents recently where like somebody damaged really expensive equipment with a forklift. And so we said, okay, well, decertify them from forklift driving until they retake the course. And man, everybody, this goes back to everybody's perception. Everybody lost their minds, oh my God, decertify. You don't have the authority to decertify. I said, well, what do you propose we do to ensure that this individual doesn't get right back on the forklift this afternoon and do the same thing over again?
Right.
So how else do we control that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, decertify is a really strong word. And, this, and I was okay. Well, so cancel his training, remove his training, erase his training until he suspend it. Like what? I don't care what words you use. I'm just telling you, this is how we control it.
Right.
So, again, that's all based on company perceptions and what they really give a shit about at any one time.
Right.
But back to the distance learning. So this article defines distance learning as a method of study in which lectures are broadcast or lessons are conducted by correspondence without the student needing to attend a school or college. Effectively, distance learning delivery can be broken down into two main approaches, which could still be blended into a hybrid solution. And those two approaches are synchronous and asynchronous. So synchronous means at the same time. It refers to a method of education delivery that happens in real time and requires live communication, for instance, online. It uses technology such as a teleconferencing to achieve this. Synchronous can be, by its very nature, is of course less flexible. Hold on, let me restart this. Synchronous learning, by its very nature, is of course less flexible, as students must meet with their instructor and classmates at pre-scheduled times. This approach also limits the student's ability to learn at their own pace and in their own space and time. So I think with the synchronous meaning, hey, it's like what the kids were doing in school over the last couple of years. They have to log in by a certain time every day, and they're with their classmates and their teacher, talking back and forth over Zoom or whatever the platform is they're using. And they have, certain, like you had to swing by the school and pick up packets for their homework, and the kids would still have to come home and actually write down, and complete assignments and this and that, to which you would then put back in the envelope and drop back off at the school for the teachers to grade. I think that's maybe a version of synchronous, or like in some of the jobs that I've had where you would sit in the classroom in the morning time. So from beginning a shift till lunch, it was all CBTs. And then from lunch to the end of shift was all applying what you learned in that CBT into OJT.
Right.
And I think that's an excellent, right? Let's read about it. Let's learn about it. And now let's go see what that actually is.
Right.
And put eyes on it, put hands on it, and apply what we've read to what it actually is.
Right. And I think personally that's the best formula, right? Is that's what do you call it? Explain, demonstrate, implement, and then practice, right? Yep. I think that's like the best formula there is for any kind of training, really, right? You explain it, you demonstrate what it's supposed to look like, you implement like controls or an environment where the students themselves can do it, and then you practice it. Just like, there you go, like safety wire boards, Yep. We have like different kind of fasteners and different kind of setups where you have to load how to safety wire certain things, and just let them go at it. Like, here you have like an hour and a half or whatever. Just go nuts and see how many you can get done without fucking it up.
Yeah, we also had something like that for electrical, right? We would have to build these harnesses and connectors, and then we had like this board where you would plug in your cable and you would throw certain switches to do certain things. And, if you got a fault light, you had to troubleshoot, essentially learn to troubleshoot your own harness that you built and figure out where you messed up. Oh, I didn't fully seat this pin in the connector all the way, or there's an actual break in this line, or you know what? I read the drawings wrong and I pinned it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of stuff.
Right.
Now, asynchronous distance learning. In asynchronous distance learning, students may achieve clusters of weekly deadlines. They have the freedom to work at their own space and time and at their own speed. Students can access course content beyond the scheduled meeting or class times, but still interact flexibly with peers through online conversations, quizzes, or videos. Now that is like what my college courses were. That was all asynchronous.
Right.
The course was 5 weeks long, I think. Mm-hmm. And then you could see each week what was due and what the assignment was. You could work ahead. You could just go week to week. You could wait until the very end and turn it all in and do all the work from all 5 weeks in the last week and turn it in at that time, whatever the case may be.
Right. Now, yeah. I can see like the synchronous learning be very beneficial to pilots because, it's one set of rules. It's one set of regulations that they got to know. Or say you got these online simulators, right, where you can just play around with it on your personal computer, right? It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Like you got like a simulated throttle controller or whatever. You can just be like, when this light comes on, what happens? Like, oh, this one. Or when you hear this warning, what happens? Like, oh, this one, right? But that's good familiarization because we're not going to have that kind of money to stick a brand new, never before flown pilot into a seat and just say, have fun.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where flight sims really come into play because you can then induce faults, whatever kind of fault, and then how you apply what you've read in your flight manuals, how to counteract and resolve and fix, or how to deal with said issue without being in an actual, multi-million-dollar aircraft at 40,000 feet trying to figure it out. That's part of your training.
I kind of wish they had like one of those kind of sims, but for mechanics, right? Like, this kind of fault came on. What do you do? Oh shit, right? And
yeah, so I know it depends on the company and what they chose to develop into training, but like there would be like we had like the fault isolation boards like with cables and stuff like that, but we would have things if you were running an engine and you receive this fault, what are you supposed to do? How do you react to it? And this and that. And now like simulators can be sort of set up that way as well, but like for engine run specific stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So like a lot of mechanics, at least in like the corporate realm, are also taxi qualified, high speed taxi qualified, engine run qualified, whatever on that airframe. So like for me, I would get in, start it up, taxi out, make all the radio calls to the tower, do high-speed taxi checks or engine run checks, and then bring it back to the ramp, park it, shut it down, all that kind of stuff. So you could, I guess, do that kind of training in a simulator, but I guess if you were actually, that's when you was, okay, what do you do in this case? But I guess if you're just doing normal ops checks, oh, we got this fault, shut everything down, let's figure out what it is,
Right. Or kind of like a troubleshooting training, because that's another one that really needs to get.
And troubleshooting for me was all learned just by doing, right? Just by actually getting a real time fault and having to figure it out. Again, trial by fire. But it would be nice if you were like in EASA, right? You're only trained on 3 airframes, so it would be nice to have. Okay, if you receive this fault, what do you do if you receive this fault? And I guess those are all fault isolation manual type stuff, but I don't know. I agree. I get what you're saying though, right? Where you have like a board and you're working through and all of a sudden, bing, this light goes off. Oh, what is that? Oh, okay. I got a 2IA fault. Oh, what's a 2IA fault? Right. But again, that's all fault isolation manual stuff. If the airframe has a good fault isolation manual, which it should, not all of them do, but it should.
It should. Right. And you can't catch everything, which is another big thing about training is you get a lot of people that would argue with you and say like, well, it didn't tell me what not to do. I'm like, excuse me?
Yeah.
I hate those arguments. Like, well, it didn't tell me not to do that. Like, it kind of did, because it says this is what you shall do. So this is like your limited box of what you're able to do. So anything outside of that is a do not. So
right, yeah. It says do this, but it didn't tell me I couldn't kill the motors mid-flight. Well, yeah. But why kill the good motor? Well, it didn't tell me not to kill the good motor. Well, okay, all right. But why kill the good motor?
Right.
Now you have no power.
Right. Let's not do that. But
well, like, again, for me, right? Here's a good one that a sim could have probably helped. I was down in Texas and I was taxiing this jet. Now this airfield was kind of like a U-shaped, right?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't flat. It was up on top of a hill, and it kind of was a U-shape, right? The ends of the runway were higher than the middle. And I had to taxi uphill, go out and we changed the fuel control out. Had to go do a power assurance check on it. Taxied all the way to the far end of the airfield to where the hammerhead was, spun around, did our checks. As I'm coming back, the brakes gave out.
Ooh.
Uh-oh. This is all downhill. What do I do? You know? And trial by fire, right? Dumped the buckets. Fortunately, I had thrust reversers on it, so I dumped the buckets and slow myself as much as I can, cut power, and then I pulled the e-brake a little bit, but really that didn't do much. And so fortunately the ramp was pretty empty, and I come in and I just do circles. I killed both engines once I got into the ramp, and just turned it in circles until I rolled to sort of a stop.
Oh shit. That was a real oh shit moment.
That was a real oh shit moment, man. I was like, I'm pretty sure I shit my pants that day. It had to, man.
I mean, I would have.
I took this when I got out of the cockpit. I took the seat with me, like I was clenching that hard, you know. But those are stuff where I'm like, that's stuff you don't get trained on. What happens in that scenario? As mechanics, we don't get that training. I mean, aircrew get that training probably. I would hope, but I didn't get that training, and I'm going. I mean, what if there's more aircraft in the ramp? What if do I roll it up the hill on the other side? But I thought about doing, okay, I'll just roll up to the other end of the taxiway. But I'm like, what happens when I get up there and I can't stop? Now I'm rolling backwards and I can't see.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I can't remember what the issue was when I finally got stopped, but we had the what happened to the whole like brake reservoir, like it blew a line up in the back of the AV. It like ruptured a hard line and just pissed out all of its brake fluid. And it was a mess to clean up, but that was what happened.
Jesus.
And we had to replace both brake sets because I melted them. And I think that's what ultimately stopped me, is they pretty much welded the brakes together.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I'm picturing this in my head. I'm like, yeah, I'm picturing it in my head like, Jesus, man. Fuck, I don't know what I would have done. It's like, pull the ejection seat, fuck it.
No eject seat in this bird. Unfortunately, it was a very small bird. I think it was a Citation Encore. Very, very small. Very small jet. But yeah, it was, that was scary, man.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, so definitely, yeah, some kind of sim training for that would have helped out, especially for the mechs, because I'm sure aircrew has something similar to that effect. Like what happens when the brake goes out? What happens when the reverse thrusters don't work, or the flaps are stuck or some shit like that? But for the average mech, like we don't do none of this shit. Like, if the brakes don't work, I mean, just kind of jiggle the stick around and just do circles until you run out of gas. I'm like, okay. But that definitely would have helped.
So that's one time when that would have really benefited me. Continuing reading through this article, it says experienced students that had previously been required to travel to attend open courses for EASA Part 66 modular training produced better pass rates when experiencing essentially the same training delivery, but via Zoom software and being based at home. But to me, that says they've already gone through the training. So this is just recurrent training. They've already seen it. They're already working it. I can see maybe some recurrency training, especially if you're doing some of the same jobs over and over. Like, yeah, there's probably no reason to have to attend a full on course again, but that's only if you've gotten the training, right?
Right.
Once before. So it says, notwithstanding the obvious financial advantages of not having to pay for travel and accommodation, student feedback also identified the following. The learning experience was less stressful as they were in their familiar environment. There was less direct peer pressure, encouraging more students to ask questions. They were not subject to other distractions and stress raisers, such as being in an unfamiliar accommodation, disruption of sleep patterns, getting to and from the training center, even basic things such as the sourcing of meals.
Yeah.
But it said, interestingly, the same could not be said for apprentice new starters whose pass rates dipped slightly when training delivery was conducted remotely. It goes into what we just said, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it works if you've already received the training once, but if it's your first time, like that's not fair either, right?
Right.
Can't ask nobody questions. You're going, I've never seen this before. I'm reading this material, but that'd be like me coming to you on helos, and okay, for you could do it from home because hell, you've been working on it for years and whatever else, but my first time seeing it. So how is that? It's not a fair assessment.
Right. I agree. And you're absolutely right. And I think that's part of the finding the right approach is like, if you're a new student, it's probably more beneficial for you to actually go to a physical class, or at least have some kind of hybrid where you get like the prereqs out of the way, and then you move on to a no kidding class. That's kind of like how some of the stuff in the military works. Not for everything, but some stuff, like we send you this correspondence course to kind of get you familiar with what the coursework is going to look like when you do go to the real class. So when you do go to the real one, you already have a handle of what you're supposed to be knowing. You have an idea of what certain definitions are. And then we can like skip the whole introductory phase of the course and then just go right into the material. Like, okay, so you guys know what a helicopter is. So now we're going to go into the systems. We're going to go into the power requirements, the safety requirements, blah, 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 just to kind of skip out all the icebreaker classes. Because how many times you guys go into school, like the first 2 days is kind of like introductory stuff, like familiar with what safety procedures are, familiar with what classroom procedures are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I feel like for first time students, like it should be a must that you at some point in time have to sit down in a classroom.
Yeah. Again, we've said this in numerous episodes. Finances are what drive everything.
Yeah.
So it says you must also recognize the financial challenges facing our industry on an individual and corporate basis. Factor number one when choosing a distance learning solution is affordability. There are of course some good quality distance learning solutions out there, albeit they may not necessarily have utilized learning science as much as they might. But how many of them would an aspiring certifying technician or pilot living and working anywhere in the world be able to afford? Right. So there's all types of training out there, but some of them are really good. But a lot of the times the company is not willing to send you to those or pay for those. So you're paying that out of pocket, right? So how much of those can we actually afford? That's the whole issue behind it, I guess.
Right. So like, is there going to be a time where that budget's going to increase? Probably not. And especially with a lot of experience leaving because of age or medical conditions, or they're just retiring, like they're just done with the work and they're moving on to other stuff. So you're losing all this. And so how do you bridge the gap? And sadly, online is probably one of the better solutions, just because like if you're going to do a full on classroom, you're going to need someone who knows what the hell they're saying. And that might not be someone who's very experienced or has a better means of teaching the subject to you. So, I mean, that's one of those give and takes. But again, it goes down to money. Like, how much is the company willing to shell out, and how much do they have available for you to shell out?
Well, and if the company gives more money for training, it's always more CBTs. At least what I'm seeing recently. And you're like, no, like do more hands-on classes. But again, like oftentimes your training department isn't filled with people who work on the vehicle or who have worked on the vehicle or whatever else. So that's an issue, right? And it's hard to take your senior people and send them out on the floor, or take them off the floor to send up and do training courses, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is probably what's needed. And nobody's taking the time out of training to go down and learn the vehicle either.
Very true.
So something's, depending on the company specifically, but something's going to have to change in those realms.
Right. I remember this one time where like I was getting like a sheet metal class from a guy who's only done one type of airframe, but he's teaching a general sheet metal class. I'm like, okay, so we're going to learn how to do this thing. I don't know how it works for this other airframes, but this is how you do it on mine. I'm like, well, that doesn't fucking help, man. Like, I'm here to learn general, not how you do it.
Right. But that's like, we have a guy, he's like, well, I don't know how it's done here because I'm a Navy guy. But this is how we did it in the Navy. I'm like, well, that doesn't fit this scenario.
Right.
Like, this is how we did it on the boat. Like, this is how you fix the aircraft on the boat? No. I was like the boat maintainer. Like, I maintained the hull of the boat. I'm like, that doesn't fucking, it's not the same.
Yeah, right. That doesn't help us. You do not help us.
Yeah. That's the downfall of it. So hopefully we can get some more of the training people spooled up to do that, or incentivize the lead maintainers to pull them off the floor and help develop some new training or teach the course, right? So the up and comers are getting the most out of that time that they are in training.
Right.
Again, just down to planning and everything else and schedules, right? The schedule is always going to win. So I think there's a way to do it, at least for my own program. I think there's definitely a way to achieve it. But trying to get all parties involved and to have the air quotes bandwidth to do this kind of stuff is more the challenge, right? People are always the challenge. Trying to get anybody to do anything extra is quite a conundrum.
Yeah, preach away, man. But let you the listeners, let us know, like, what do you feel is a good solution to bridge the training gap, both for online and for in person, with all the shortages that we're experiencing across the industry? Like, what do you propose we could do? And please let us know in the comments, in emails and DMs and all kinds of stuff. Just give us your feedback. Let us know what you guys think is a good solution.
Or if you guys are newer to the industry and have pretty much solely been doing CBTs, but they've worked for you. I mean, what's the program the CBTs are? Are they really in depth? Is it just, I guess, what works about it for you? Just because that's how you learn better, or is it the platform upon which they are developed and delivered? And I guess with that, once again, Happy New Year, everyone. And thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.
We'd like to take this time to thank our patrons for supporting our show and allowing us to continue to make episodes, maintain our gear, and create merch for all of our listeners, with special thanks to Erica Lamont, Chris Hawkins, Ryan Freshour, Dan Schubert, Jenny Dignan, and the ladies of the Dick Talk and Mimosas podcast. Thank you all so much for your support and patronage. Visit our shop at cancelformaintenance.com and grab some swag to show off both your support for us and your prowess as an aircraft technician. If you have ideas for the show, or you'd like to be a guest on the show, visit our contact us section and send us a line. We will do what we can to get your ideas or yourself on the show. You can also follow us on social media, such as on Facebook at Cancel for Maintenance, Instagram at Canx, that's CANX for Maintenance Podcast, or on Twitter at CXMX Podcast. Check out some of our affiliates like Rockwell Time, where they make both rugged and classy watches to fit your lifestyle. Use the code CX4MX and save 10% off your purchase. Support us on Patreon. Our patrons get exclusive perks such as access to our Discord, discounts and early access to merch, special patron-only episodes, and so much more. Thank you again so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.